I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with AJ Benza. AJ Benza is the host of a very popular podcast called Fame is a Bitch, which has a free version Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week, and a Patreon version, which is Monday through Friday, and it's only $5. In this episode, we talk about where AJ grew up and how he ended up being the gossip columnist for the New York Daily News for most of a decade. We also talk about AJ's hit TV show, Mysteries and Scandals, which lasted 172 episodes or something like that. Plus, we talk about how AJ manages to get himself into situations where people just tell him everything. We also talk about the short period of time that AJ worked for John Gotti. Yes, that one. The Teflon Don himself. Obviously, we talk about his podcast, Fame is a Bitch, which I listen to both versions. And finally, AJ tells us stories about Frank Sinatra, about Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Smith, plus, spoiler alert, he tells us who and how many presidents he's Eskimo brothers with. What? So enjoy, folks. This is my conversation with AJ Benza, the host of Fame is a Bitch.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street, AJ Benza. How you doing today, man?
Good, Steve. How are you, man?
I am fantastic. Thank you for asking. And thank you for doing this. A little bit of background. The first time I heard about you was on the Adam Carolla show. And once I heard you on there and you became a recurring guest because A, your information is so awesome, and B, you're so witty and funny. You were just an instant magnet for me. So thank you for that. And how did that happen?
We did a live podcast once, probably maybe almost 2 years ago. And I don't like doing live podcasts. I wasn't ready for one yet at that point, but we wanted to gauge things. So I went to this bar in West Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, about 15 people in the room. And one of the people in the room was this guy named Patrick, who works for Adam and runs the Carolla Drinks section of their businesses. And he is a fan of mine. He liked it. And he came to me after the show and said, look, I work with Adam Carolla and his wife. I'd love to get you on the show. And that's how it began. So I did a guest spot. And you can't really tell if Adam likes you because I'd never met him the first time I saw him. And, that little Asperger thing he's got, you don't really know if he's listening to you, looking at you. But I found out from people that, no, he really likes your stuff. And then we just started making each other laugh. I went to his Christmas party and it just developed from there. Now it's like, I'd say once a month, I'm usually on there. That's great. I love it. It's given my show a lot of publicity. And I just love sitting across from him as much as I did Howard Stern. I think it's something we really need in this country right now. And what Stern was doing was great, but he doesn't do that anymore. So I look back with fond memories, but Adam is kind of taking the torch, I feel, in that genre.
Well, I agree. And I've met Adam a couple of times, and you're right. It's hard to tell if he likes you or not.
Yeah. He's very busy. The guy's got so many things going on. Now that I know his life better, I hung out with Lynette, his wife. We went to Vegas together, so I know a lot more. The guy's spinning 20 plates at once. He's very involved as a father, as a race car driver. He's got so many different businesses. This guy's still going to check out houses and construction before he goes to do the podcast. I don't know where he gets it. Got time. Then he does free comedy at night, the Laugh Factory or the Comedy Store. He's unstoppable.
Well, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, right?
True, yeah.
So, AJ, where were you born and raised, man? I know you're a New York kid, but which borough?
I was born in Brooklyn. I'm actually writing about Brooklyn because I'm going to talk about it in the next podcast. Grew up in Brooklyn, mainly grew up on Long Island. Family moved out there in the late 60s, and that's where I went to high school. And my upbringing was great. Long Island was great. Then, of course, I moved into New York City in the 1990s. I spent like 7 years there in Greenwich Village and working for the New York Daily News. And And then LA called, and I had myself a TV show, and I moved out here to LA in 97.
So what about growing up in that area, or what about your upbringing made you want to become a journalist?
I don't know if it was the neighborhood as much as it was. My father was an undercover narcotics cop. He worked for the U.S. Treasury. He had this ability to want to know more and dig for things. And honest to God, my mother and sisters loved reading Rona Barrett and Liz Smith. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be an actor or be on TV. So I loved to hear my mother and sisters talk about what Liz Smith or Rona Barrett was saying. And I got interested in celebrities and movie stars. And then it just didn't go anywhere because I ended up being a sports writer out of college, working for Newsday, which was a big paper on Long Island. And I loved being a high school and college sports writer. For a while, I thought I'd be a pro sports writer or just get me to a newspaper. And then gossip just happened out of the blue. I started going out after my first divorce and seeing things in New York City, recognizing stars, and I saw what they did after hours. I started giving tips to a woman, Linda Stacy, who wrote a gossip column for New York Newsday, and she liked what I was giving her because she was never out at nightclubs and seeing this stuff. So she took me on a few days a week. Before you know it, the New York Daily News hired her to write a column. She took me with her. So I went from maybe I'll be a sports writer to now I'm a gossip columnist. And then Linda, 2 years later, left that field completely. She was burned out and the page became mine. And then I was given another gossip column. So I was running two at the same time. So I fell into it, but I always had an interest. I like getting facts. I love the written word. Jimmy Breslin, Pete Hamill. There were some writers I read growing up in the newspapers. It was an instant love affair. So why not do what my heroes were doing?
So for a period of time, I want to say a long period of time, you were the gossip columnist for the New York Daily News.
Yeah.
Was it somewhere like around 10 years or something? Like it was a while.
No, it wasn't as long as you think. I have this image cloaked around me because I did it Mysteries and Scandals for the E! Channel, which was about old dead movie stars. I've done a lot. My career as a gossip columnist was 90 to 97. So just under 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not typically long. I mean, look, there's a lot of people who don't do gossip very long at all and don't leave any mark. Then there are those like Cindy Adams, Richard Johnson, Liz Smith, who've been doing it forever and leave a big mark. I was somebody that only did it 7 years, but because of my newspaper at the time, because there was a tabloid war, and frankly, because I stood out. Most gossip columnists were either from England, they were women, they were gay men. There was no one ever doing gossip, a straight Italian guy from the street who was able to infiltrate some of the celebrity circles and hang out with them, date them. So I really was a different type, and I think people were looking for that, and it filled a niche.
Well, you were super successful in that, but I do have a question for you. Like at one point, I mean, you were so popular, you were getting letters from like Demi Moore's mom and stuff. So what made people want to tell you? What made people want to dish dirt to you?
There's different factors. Number one, most everybody wants to tell you something. A good journalist is really nothing more than someone who pries and gets to somebody and then asks them a question and shuts up. People want to talk. They want to give you secrets. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you come across or if you embody a very honest person, a person that doesn't fall for shit, prints the truth, walks the walk, so to speak. I think people viewed me as being very real and honest. And, you know, I had a reputation for helping people and not burning sources. And I followed some golden rules as a journalist. But I think in general, people love the gossip. There's a reason why it's been around forever. And if you talk the truth and walk the walk and treat people right and hang around long enough and late enough that their lips get loose, you start to hear stuff. And when you start reporting big stories and getting the absolute truth and the inside angle, then people really want to see and listen to you because it's unlike so many other gossip columns. Back when I did it, I don't know if there are more than 15, 20 people in America doing gossip. Now there's thousands of people with a laptop and a basement or whatever. And all they do is take other people's stories and embellish. It's terrible. Gossip is out of hand now because the kernel of truth that usually is inside these stories is no longer there for most stories.
Okay, so walk me down this. So you and I are hanging out. I get a little tipsy. I get a little loose-lipped. And then you write a story about it. What makes me want to hang out with you again?
Well, you can't do that to people. I mean, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily be sitting down initially writing a story about the person I'm talking to. If I want to get information on somebody, if I find out some movie star is having an affair, Well, then I would make myself available to certain people that I know are in his satellite, in his array of friends. And if you can ask the right questions and shut up and just listen, they tend to give up facts or bits of information that if you string them together, they equal, yeah, the guy is messing around on his girl, or, or maybe he isn't. But you start to get the truth. Things become clearer. That's why you usually want to go to two sources at least to get to a story. So, again, I wouldn't sit there with you and say, oh, I just sat down with Steve. I'm going to write a story about him tomorrow. That's one way to never get work again and to have everybody go against you. So if I was going to write something about you, I wouldn't sit down with you. Now, there are many, many nights where I sat down with movie stars and big athletes, and you talk to them, and maybe they confide in you with some things they'd rather not have other people know. You can't write those things ever. If you give them your word, if they say off the record and you say yes, of course, and you never bury them, you never write that stuff. So you start to gain some trust and momentum with other people. The word spreads. AJ's a good guy. He could have burned me. I came to him with a story that was going to hurt my show or my reputation, and he didn't print it. You start doing things like that, and then you got a pocket full of favors. So then down the road, you can go to that person and say, listen, I didn't write the first fucking story that was going to hurt you. There's no way you're going to get out of this story because it's being talked around town. We know there's a divorce. Why don't you give it to me and give the facts instead of other people running with a bunch of stuff that's not true? And then if you were good to them in the past, they'll loosen up and give you the exclusive. But most of gossip is just being available to hear what's whipping around the neighborhood or the business. And once you start learning and knowing this is what's happening and knowing the players and what they do, like, for instance, the big story last week was Pam Anderson and John Peters separated after just 12 days of marriage. So, there was a fascinating story. They got back after 30 years, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was content just going, well, I guess they didn't see eye to eye or something must have happened in 12 days. No one goes into why they split. There's a story there. So I start talking to people. I talk to some playmates who know her and are still friends with her. I talk to people in production who worked at Baywatch, etc. And the story starts to emerge that, Pam owes a lot of money to the IRS. Basically, Pam can't live in America because if she works in America, they put such garnishes on her wages, it's not worth it. And when she comes to America, the people who paid her are on notice. If you hire Pam, she owes the U.S. government X amount of dollars. That word goes around. So you put those theories together and say, could it be that John Peters didn't know that this was a situation, that she wanted to live outside of America, that maybe he wouldn't see her a lot, that she has a considerable tax bill and maybe she asked them to pay it for her? You start putting facts together and actually coming to a conclusion instead of most assholes now just go, yeah, they broke up and the story's over. Not over. That's the beginning of the story, but nobody cares. So I know what the ending is because I've been around and I reach out to people who have an in with Pamela or know about her life. And there you have an exclusive story that no one else has. Now, whether I'm going to get credit for it, I doubt it because it was on my podcast and general media doesn't listen to all the podcasts out there. They can't do their job. And second, I wrote it for Radar and it might come out next week. I really don't care anymore getting credit. I know I'm right about it and let the chips fall where they may. But back in the day, if I was at the newspaper and I wrote that story, it would be on every tabloid show the next morning. It would be on Entertainment Tonight. It would be on Extra. It would be on Hard Copy, Inside Edition. But television is very, very different now. Everybody is in cahoots with the star. Nobody wants to write the truth or say the truth. They want to be invited to the parties. They want to go to the press conference. They want all the nice shit that comes with Hollywood. They don't want to stay there. Here's a story. I'm putting my name on the line because it's right. There's very few people like that anymore. And most of the media, as you know, is all mostly liberal. They don't want to say anything that rocks the boat. So there you have this country with a lack of information. I'm getting way off topic, but that's how you get a story out of nothing. Or that's how you find the truth amid all the rumors.
Well, thank you for clearing that up because I have been supremely confused for quite some time about how you're able to stay in this world and still tell these stories, but it sounds like you're pretty deft at it and you're not really burning bridges.
No, sometimes you can't help but write a story that's going to make people upset. But if you write it fair and you don't come at them underhanded, you don't embarrass them, they have to respect you because everybody's got a job. That actor has to get to the set on time and know his lines and get along with everybody so the show can be successful and he'll be hired again and blah, blah, blah. I got to do my job as a journalist, whether you like it or not, because we sell newspapers. I'm also the same journalist who's going to plug you and promote you when you've got something good. And in time, they'll come to me when we're both old warriors and have been around this town for 30 years, and I'll be able to help you if you've got an issue that needs to be hid or maybe, sweetened. So it's just a dance. It's a long dance. The people who want to be in this business with a website and don't know anybody and only have some publicist to call, that's not the people you want to read the truth from. You want to know from people who've been around the block. That's the real truth. You can tell the difference.
Nice. Now, before we move on to you basically moving to the other side of the country, I want to talk about how it is that a kid like yourself goes from working at Chess King to working with the Godfather, the Teflon Don, John Gotti.
Yeah, that was a big jump. It's a big jump now, but back then it didn't seem too big. And I'll tell you, I was an Italian kid. The mafia was always talked about in my family. My father chased them as an undercover. My mother's side had some mobsters in it. Her uncle was a guy named Happy Mayone who worked in Murder Incorporated for Meyer Lansky. He was a hitman for Meyer Lansky. He got the electric chair. So I'd known a lot about the mob and sat down with those guys before I was 10 years old. And then when I went out in the real world, I had a cousin on my mother's side, Albert, who worked for John before John Gotti was the boss. He was a soldier. He had a crew in Queens. And I needed money. I needed to buy a house. I needed to work a side job. I didn't like what I was doing. And my cousin Albert said I could get you $500 a week cash. That was a lot of money in 1987. And I said, all right. And I worked for his asphalt company. And at the same time, I had this guy who was gambling. He was living in Colorado. And his bookie died. Because I used to work for these gambling companies where you tell gamblers who to bet on and they give you 10% of what they win. They're still working now, but back in the 80s, they were very prevalent, these tout services. So I had a guy who was betting. His bookie dies, and without him betting, I'm losing money because I can't get his 10%. So I asked my cousin Albert, I need a bookie. He said, I can use my friend John's operation in Queens. And that was John Gotti. So I went and visited him. When Albert introduced us, I said, look, I got this gambler in Colorado. His bookie died. He bets a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. And John understood. He knew I wasn't a mafia guy, but he knew I was a nice kid. I went to college, and he said, you can gamble with us. He says, I'll give you half of what he loses the first time. And that's called half sheets. And I like that deal because this guy Paul lost $13,000 the first week, and I got $6 and change. And I said, this is a great side job. So I got a few other guys that I brought into his operation. And that's how I got to know John Gotti. I didn't work for him per se, but I worked in his operation briefly. And then when I became a journalist, I didn't want to leave New York. I had a journalism degree, but I didn't want to work for a newspaper outside of New York. I just felt I was too good to leave. I was very brash and, arrogant. I could write journalism in New York. I don't have to write in fucking Alabama or, all my buddies were going to papers in North Carolina, Texas, starting at $16,000 a year. I said, I can't live like that. I can't leave my mother's cooking and go to fucking Texas. So I stayed. I was stubborn. And as I stayed, I needed to earn money. And there you go. That's the John Gotti story. Back then, I had 2 part-time jobs. My wife had 1, and we were able to buy a house on Long Island. Those days are over. And then once we divorced in 91, the world was my oyster. I had a little bit of money in the bank. I started going to New York City. That's when I started noticing things. But I always wanted to work in the city. I always wanted to be known. I always wanted to see my byline. I wanted to be on television. Like what I don't really get across to people is that constant ringing in my ears that I had to do these things. I felt like the 5 years I was married derailed me. It took me away from acting, which I wanted to do. So I had to get back. And I had this gusto that I guess a lot of people don't have. I was making up for lost time. And that's how a lot of things happen. I just had more energy and speed and stick-to-itiveness than other people around me. And that's how you kind of fall into things because I didn't turn anything down. I said yes to everything. And that's how a lot of things happen so quickly.
So,
hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Guess what, Streetwalkers? The gear is here. A bunch of you have been asking for quite some time, and now finally it's here. Head over to FascinationStreetPod.com and check out the Gear tab. There, you'll find all kinds of FSP items to tickle your fancy. T-shirts, coffee mugs, sticker packs, pins, buttons, coasters, and my personal favorite, For just $5, you can get one of those weird little phone handle pop thingies. So head to FascinationStreetPod.com and show the world that you're proud to be a streetwalker. Special thanks to my good buddy Stephen O'Reilly from the Bar Star Podcast for these dope drum beats. Check out Steve's work at O'Reilly Drums on Instagram or search Stephen O'Reilly on YouTube.
Let's get back into it.
Now we're going to move on to LA. I'm not really sure how it all happened, but you you were the host of a show on E! Called Mysteries and Scandals, right? And it was ran for like 172 episodes or something like that.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I was more or less forced to resign from the Daily News. Pete Hamill, my idol as a writer, he didn't like celebrity gossip. It just wasn't his bag. So he called me in and said, look, I can hire 5 or 6 reporters for the money you're earning. So but these 5 or 6 reporters could be all over the city for me, writing about the immigrants that are coming to New York, writing about all these different, just so many different stories. And he says, I can't figure out why I'm paying you all this money to write gossip. Basically, he was going to fire me. So I resigned. And around the same time, I was also doing a show on the E! Channel called The Gossip Show, which was the precursor to TMZ. And it was a bunch of journalists in their offices at magazines and newspapers. And they would just turn to the camera and do 2 minutes of gossip. It's a very easy show to produce. The E! Channel had a cameraman out here and one girl who would ask you questions. And they went to like 10 different offices in New York and LA, and that was their half-hour show. So they knew me and they liked my gossip. I was very different. Then a producer there had the idea to put together a show about a fish out of water host like me, talking about all the dead celebrities over the years in Tinseltown and Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, Mae West, all these fantastic stars. And he suggested I host it. And first everybody he said, no, that's the dumbest idea. And then as he tells it, a second later, they all said, you know what, that could work. And I came out to LA to shoot the pilot on my own money. They didn't have money to pay me. We put together a sizzle reel, and he picked it up. So I came to LA with a job waiting for me, and I didn't know at the time that that's not something people normally have, a series commitment from a network, but I did. And we had 13 episodes guaranteed, and it was a big chance I took. I took the leap, moved to LA, lived in a tiny little apartment, a 1-bedroom, me and my dogs, and those 13 episodes turned into 52, turned into 100, then 107. It went for 4 years and change until we did about 170 episodes. And while I was doing that, started to get other work in LA, did a movie here or there, other TV spots. And then my life began. I began to put down roots out here. So that's how that became. So yeah, I went from gossip, which I really thought I was going to be getting out of. Someday I'm hosting a show about old celebrities in Hollywood, old movie stars. So I kind of kept that image as a guy who knows about celebrity. And I tried to buck it and kind of move out of it, maybe in like 1999, 2000. And I did walk away from gossip completely. But 4 or 5 years ago, I said, what am I doing? I'm in my 50s. This is what people know me for. And I've always contended that you are who the world says you are. Eventually, that's who you are. You can try to put on new hats, and that works in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. Once you're in your 50s and people know you for something, and if you play it right, it can be lucrative and it can be your legacy, why change it? Just go with it. So that's how the podcast was born. I thought I could do a show every day. I didn't know what I'd talk about, how I'd do it. So the show has evolved in the last 2.5 years. Where it's at right now, it's more of my opinion about inside Hollywood and stories that break. I have ideas about, I have angles on, I break stories. This is like the newest incarnation of what I was doing at the Daily News. I'm just breaking stories, but now they're going right into your ears instead of your eyes.
Gotcha. And then I guess it was after that, there was AJ After Hours.
That was the direction I really thought my career was going to go to. The people at E! Were very happy with my show, and the ratings were great, and they had money now to pay me a lot of money, and they said, what do you want to do next? And I said, I wanted to have a talk show since 1995, which they always knew, but I wasn't ready yet. The people didn't know me enough for the network to take a chance on me. Once they saw Mysteries and Scandals was an established hit, now you could a talk show. And it was everything that I wanted it to be. It was me producing it, writing it, hosting it. My buddies were involved in New York City, in Chinatown, in a giant loft. I wanted a rooftop. I wanted intimate. I wanted like Playboy After Dark, but with me. And I even sat down with Hugh Hefner and we talked about the idea. He gave it its blessing, and I had what I thought was going to be the new me. And then the new regime came in at E, the regime that didn't sit down with me initially and talk about the talk show for years. And they gave it 4 weeks and they said, nah, this is not the direction we want to go. And they changed E completely. And I was very bitter for a while because I thought the talk show would rightfully so take me back to New York because I missed New York. And I'm not saying I had visions of being a Jimmy Kimmel or a Jimmy Fallon, but I certainly thought there's a niche here. I could have a talk show at E for 3-4 years, and God knows what happens then. Then I'm looking at $1 million contracts. But I think that's where it would have went. Maybe a Comedy Central or Spike TV or one of those networks. But it all changed when a woman came in, Mindy Herman, who changed E completely, was eventually fired for sexual harassment of females because she was a lesbian. Just horrible, horrible. So that ended that. And then I just said, fuck TV. I'm not going to be in this game. Fuck gossip. And then I got a poker show for 4 years, High Stakes Poker, which was #1 on Game Show Network. So I really was getting further and further away from gossip. Then I did Rocky Balboa, and now I think, well, I really should push the acting. I wrote a book. I was writing my second book. Okay, I'll be an author. All the other satellite branches of my life were being formulated. And now I like what the podcast has me. I like the script. I'm writing scripts. I'm writing my third book. Looks like the poker show, High Stakes Poker, will come back. We're going to go to Vegas in April and shoot some episodes and shop it. So I like where this is now. Everything's good. I like the way it feels. I work out of my house 99% of the time, which is great. I get to see my kids. I take them to school. I pick them up from school. I cook dinner for everybody. This is perfect for me right now.
I heard you say once that you made your career on the OJ trial. How so?
I shouldn't have said I made it. I happen to be very fortunate that the 90s, the span of time that I was a gossip columnist, lent itself to some outstanding scandalous coverage. If it wasn't the OJ trial, it was the Michael Jackson molestation trial, which, by the way, my column broke. We were the first people to mention Jordan Chandler and the whole relationship between Michael Jackson and Jordy. So the Michael Jackson trial, the OJ trial, Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan, the Menendez brothers, John Wayne Bobbitt, Mary Jo Buttafuoco, Amy Fisher. There was a new scandal, it seemed like every month. And 4 days ago, I shot some footage for Fox News because they're congratulating Geraldo Rivera on 50 years in the business. And when I used to do the Geraldo show every Friday for at least 2 years, the bunch of us, Sidney Adams, Steve Dunleavy, myself, Mike Walker from The Inquirer, a bunch of gossip columns would sit with Geraldo and talk about the Michael Jackson case, the O.J. Simpson case, even more so. And back then, Geraldo was getting 6 million viewers per show. That is unheard of for a daytime talk show. So the exposure I got, not only writing about O.J. Simpson, going to the courthouse, sitting there on Geraldo's show an hour a week, talking to 6 million people. Yes, it definitely shined a light on me, a national light. So in that sense, I was bigger than my beat in New York.
Oh, wow. Rock on, man.
You got more eyeballs on me, and that's thanks to OJ, really.
What a weird twist of fate.
Yeah, I know, man. It is crazy. Then I bumped into OJ on an elevator in Miami after he was found not guilty, and he walked in the elevator and saw me, and I was not scared, but it does stand you up straight for a second. Suddenly the guy you've been talking shit about for years is now across from you. You get to see how big he is. I stuck my hand out. I said, oh, hey, man, OJ, AJ Benza, Daily News. At that point, I wasn't even thinking about it being a journalist. It was just, there's one of my football heroes. And he said, hey, man, he said, I know who you are. And I said, yeah, hey, man, just doing my job. And he said, yeah, it's okay, man. And I said, I'm getting out here. And he said, I'm going to the penthouse. Talk about a microcosm again. A guy being found not guilty of killing his wife and a friend, going to the penthouse for a party in Miami. And I'm left shaken that, wow, I just met OJ. Yeah, it was a very different kind of trial at that whole thing.
Yeah, no shit. Speaking of trials, I guess it's not happening anymore, but at one point you were scheduled to testify in New York in the Harvey Weinstein trial.
Right.
Because I guess you guys are friends. Do you think that when that trial moves to California, you will have to testify?
Yeah, I just made the comment about that. I was asked by the DA to go to New York. I talked to my lawyer. I said, can you look into more of this? And he said, look, if they're going to fly you out and put you up in a hotel, there's a lot they want to talk to you about. They're not going to invest that kind of money for nothing. So he called the DA and she said there was a motion today, Harvey's lawyers filed a motion. AJ doesn't have to appear. The judge said it doesn't matter. What the judge in California will have to say or think about, I don't know, because I am a California resident. So this way, if they call me, I've got to go. So I don't know. If they call, I'm not nervous. I'm simply going to tell the truth about whatever. Look, whenever they call you in to sit down and be a witness, they know they have all the answers. There's no sense lying about stuff. They have emails or text messages between the two of us. So it is what it is. I was never helping him in this whole rape thing. He reached out to me way back in 2017 before anybody knew anything about this. And all he told me was they're doing a hit piece on me. I stood with him for about 20 minutes. He never mentioned the hit piece was about sexual abuse. He just said, it's another one of those fucking hit pieces. Somebody doesn't like me. I want to find out who's talking. I want to find out who's writing it. Everything was unknown. I said, yeah, I'll help you. Sure. All right, give me a time frame. He said, sit tight. I'll call you in a week. He never called. I texted him, hey, you need me still? Hold on. After about a month, I didn't get any conversation out of Harvey at all. It was gone. And then I read Rose McGowan mention something about my ex-boyfriend sold the script to my rapist. And I said, ooh, that sounds like she's talking about Harvey, because the ex-boyfriend is Robert Rodriguez that she dated. And then I put two and two together and I said, oh my God, this is a hit piece about him raping Rose McGowan. I didn't know how big it was going to turn into, what kind of developments were to come. But I never heard from Harvey again, except for the eve before the Ronan Farrow piece ran. By this time, everybody knew Ronan Farrow wrote a piece. It was going to be in the New Yorker. And Harvey just texted me and said, help me. And I wrote back, there's nothing to do. The guy's got a crystal clear reputation, born in a Hollywood pedigree. There's no dirt on Ronan Farrow. Basically, there was nothing I could do, but I wouldn't have anyhow. I wouldn't have helped somebody who was being accused of rape get away with rape. I would, however, and I did, communicate with a friend who was in trouble. And I talked to him well after it was established that he's an alleged rapist. If you listen to my show, you know that if he raped one girl, I believe he should do the time without question. But I do happen to believe most, if not all, of these girls who've come forward have buyer's remorse. And we're in these consensual situations with him, made more common by the way Hollywood has been run for a century. So it remains to be seen. But Tuesday's cross-examination of Jessica Mann was embarrassing for the prosecution. This girl is laying out the fact that she was consensual with him, the way she talks about him to her boyfriend. Oh, my God. This girl was a gift from heaven for Harvey Weinstein. But like I said, if he's found guilty of raping one girl, and if he did rape one girl, then he should do the time, because I've got a daughter, and that's disgusting.
I do too, and I agree wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you might not even answer this, and that's fine, but it would sort of appear that you might have dirt on literally everybody. So, that said, you're friends with Harvey and you're friends with Adam Carolla.
Yeah.
Do you have anything interesting to say about former Miramax Golden Boy and Adam Carolla nemesis, Kevin Smith?
I was with Kevin once on the Howard Stern show. Me, him, and Jason Mewes. Three of us did something on Howard Stern about, this girl came in thinking she was a perfect 10, something like that, and we critiqued her, which, again, is something you can never do again. I mean, we actually had laser pointers, and we're pointing at parts of her body, because this girl claimed she was a 10, and we were telling her, no, you're not. Either way, it's embarrassing to even think about it. But no, I don't know anything about Kevin. I think I like the majority of his movies. He was a trailblazer back in the early Miramax days. When I was a fan of Harvey, I know Harvey since he had like 12 employees at Miramax when it wasn't a gigantic operation. So, no, I don't have dirt on Kevin. I think the only dirt there ever was on him was I think he was fucking around with Joey Lauren Adams before he put her in the movie. Kevin Smith is a below-the-radar guy. He's not juicy for a tabloid. No one's looking to read dirt on Kevin Smith. So he can escape most anything he may have been involved in. He's a geek who liked comic books and smoking cigarettes and making movies. There was nothing sexy about him.
Well, this is going to sound weird, but that's actually good to hear. I'm kind of a big fan.
I'm a fan of some of his movies, not Dogma. I like Chasing Amy. I love Clerks, the first one. I think he's doing something soon again, right? That's a follow-up to something.
Yeah, he's doing all kinds of crazy shit right now, yeah.
I like when he stands up on a stage and talks for an hour. There's a lot that I get out of a guy like that. I appreciate his honesty and his candor. And there's a reason why you like Kevin Smith in the field he's in. There are other directors who are better, but Kevin Smith is amenable and he's honest. He looks you in the eye and he tells the truth. And he tells great stories, funny stories about things we can kind of all understand. Like I used to get mad at my wife because she never listened to the podcast. And yet, whenever a story broke, she'd have an opinion on how I should say it on the show. And I'd say, you can't do that to me because you don't listen to the show. You think that everything I do comes out of me being some anti-feminist, misogynist guy, and we'd argue about it. And one day Kevin Smith is talking on this HBO or whatever special he did, and he's like, his wife never listens to his podcast. She rolls her eyes at the jokes he tells in public. The point is, your wives really don't need to know that much about what you say when you earn the living. Just give them the check and keep doing what you do. It opened my eyes to, don't get so up on your wife for not listening to your show. Most everybody that's on TV or is publicly speaking like their wives kind of tune it out because they get you all day. And if they have to do that on top of that, they have no life of their own to live. So Kevin taught me something by not putting so much emphasis on, did you listen to my show? I dropped that. I don't care if anybody listens. As long as I have my listeners out there beyond my family, I don't expect my family to listen. It's fine.
I feel like that's probably a pretty common underlying theme with podcasters. I can't imagine that Lynette listens to Adam.
No.
And I know my wife doesn't listen to me, so.
No, it's just that Lynette will roll her eyes when I mention something about Adam and she loves him, but that's the way most wives are. And it takes a lot of ego to do this thing, to think that you have enough value that I'm going to start my own show. And I'm going to talk every day to strangers. I'm going to make them like what I have to say. That takes a lot of ego. And I'm not sure that ego is so comfortable for other people to be around all the time. But it's what me and tons of other people with podcasts have to feel to keep it going, to keep the ball in the air, to keep the plate spinning. We have to think that people want to hear what I have to say. And if you use that in the wrong way, it can get you in trouble. So I use it for me. It's not more important than my marriage, my family, my kids. It pays the bills. It's no more important than a guy who digs out pools for people's backyards. That's how he earns his money. His wife doesn't want him to operate the bulldozer. You know what I mean? So you got to forget about stuff like that. Just do your job and do what you got to do to make a living, and that's it.
Yeah, I feel like our wives get enough of us when we're not on a microphone. They don't need to have even more of us.
And I got news here. I don't even like doing it if she's somewhere in the house and can hear me. I'm not the person I want to be on the podcast who may say certain things that would upset her. I can't think about that. I've got to be true to myself and that show. So preferably, I'd rather she not be home when I do it, to be honest.
Well, that is a very good point. And since you talked about the show, the podcast is called Fame is a Bitch. There is a free version and a Patreon version. How many episodes, or what's the schedule for the free version?
Free version is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The Patreon is daily. Patreon's more personal. If there's a story I'm going to break, I do it for my patrons. Recently, between the Royal and Megxit, Kobe dying, and the Scientology stuff I was just kicking with, the Patreon has gone up. I made a few of those shows available to the audience of the free show to let them know what they might be missing. So as a result, both numbers are going up. So right now, I'm in a good zone. There's a lot of things to get my opinion about wrapped around. It's a good time right now. Unfortunately, the death of Kobe was one of the factors. I wish that were different, but what can you do?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the Scientology bit because you have a new passion, and your new passion is to, I guess, completely destroy, in your words, Ginger Dick Danny Masterson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like this guy. I've always had a bad feeling about him. I've met him a couple times, and my feelings happen to be with a lot of people swear to me are true about him being an alleged rapist. And now there are 6 girls who've come forward. Some are former Scientologists, some are not. It opens the door to, I would hope one day, some sort of trial, because this guy seems to be the guy that preyed on young girls, including Mila Kunis, maybe as young as 15, because she got that show when she was 14. I don't like guys like that. I don't like him. I don't like him. I hate Scientology. It's a bunch of hypocritical assholes, and I'm taking some swings at them now. Not nearly going to do the damage that Leah Remini did or Tony Ortega with his underground bunker, but I like the reception I got from people who were anti, and I'm going to keep taking some swings at them when I have the information I need and stories I can go with.
Well, I am a listener and a patron. I listen to both shows, and
Cool.
folks, he really does take some swings. It's called Unfiltered for a reason.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
You're welcome. So you wrote a book called 74 and Sunny, which I understand is in pre-production. How is that coming along?
You know, Hollywood works at a snail's pace. If you have any idea how long movies take, I mean, Forrest Gump took 13 years, A League of Their Own. So I can't even begin to count. The Irishman, for example, took 18 years to come to fruition. The book's
Holy
been
shit.
out forever. No, I read the book years ago. My agent represents the writer of that book, Charles Brandt. I read that book so long ago, and I remember saying, this would be a good movie. Anyhow, so I wrote the book, what is it now, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? I forget. Love the book. It's a really different kind of side of me. It's me as a kid in Long Island, spending a summer with my cousin from New Jersey who was gay. He was a little boy. He was 10. I was 12. His father, my uncle, wanted him to spend the summer with my family because we had a very loud, macho Sicilian family, and my uncle thought his son was gay like his other son, who was now old and out of the house, and he was concerned. He didn't know how to handle it. Called it brain damage. And he thought if he spent the summer with us, we would change him, we'd fix him. And obviously the book is about how he changed us and to be more accepting. And it's a sweet story of that neighborhood and the culture in 1974 on Long Island. But I wrote the screenplay. I found somebody, producer Andy Weiss, who's done some great things, and he's behind it. George Gallo was attached as a director. He just did 2 movies in a row. We're looking for funding. I'm not even concerned. Like, I used to wring my hands over screenplays I wrote that got bought. When is it going to get made? The 2 screenplays I sold have never got made. One is still being shopped around via the option. This is a whole heartbreaking story I haven't even told yet on the show. It was going to get produced by Quentin Tarantino's main producer, Shannon McIntosh, who's done everything from Pulp Fiction to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She loved it. She took the script. She had the script, and she had just spent $40,000 in legal fees to do all these sorts of things to set it up. It was the perfect small movie she said she wanted to do before Quentin's next picture. And then she had a falling out with the person who optioned the script from us. Once you option the script, the writers no longer have a mouth. It belongs to the person who paid you to option it. So this idiot who optioned it from us has a drinking problem, and she would call Shannon at different hours of the night and bother her about, what are we doing? Are we going to make this movie? And finally, Shannon said, I can't do this. I can't do it with this person. And that was it. Shannon dropped the project. So I'm really going to be pissed off when I see her at the Oscars Sunday. So now it's not in pre-production. It's nowhere near that. Pre-production is when you're hiring actors and you're putting the show together. Right now, we're still looking for funding. I'm not involved in that aspect. The people who optioned it for me are. So I can only hope that it'll happen eventually. I believe it will be a film. To give you a date, it's impossible. We never know.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Streetwalkers.
Hey, are you interested in getting from A to B while sitting? At Detroit Bikes, we've got a new product that I think you're going to love. It's a bicycle. It's got 2 wheels, hence the bi. And the sickle is because it's a cycle that your wheels go in. So this is a product where you've got a seat. You are actually sitting while moving.
Wow.
And, it's as easy as just pedaling, pushing with your legs. So we think that customers are going to love this product, and we hope you'll check it out at www.detroitbikes.com.
www.detroitbikes.com.
Let's get back into it.
I know that we're sort of running up against the clock here, but I just have a couple of quick questions. How many presidents have you met and or had a friendly relationship with?
Oh, I've only met 3. I met President Ford on an airplane, first class, continental flight. He was across from me. and Secret Service all around him. Obviously, it was an empty flight, but I had my dog with me, and he held my dog, and we only talked for a few minutes, pleasantries. I met Bill Clinton in the Hamptons with a very pretty girl. He couldn't take his eyes off her kids to hold conversation, which was great. And then, of course, I go back with Donald Trump in 1991 when I used to talk to him on the phone, the gossip columnist. And Donald was somebody that liked to talk to the gossip columnists, and he loved gossiping and talking to everybody. He loved to tell you what he was up to. He's no different than he is now. I mean, this is the way he is. Loves to get dirt on people, loves to brag about himself. And he used to give us stories on people. He would give us leads. He would say, hey, look into this. In the early days, our gossip column, Linda used to like to write about anything that was New York. It could have been a big real estate deal. It could have been a striking union at a fancy restaurant. If it was New York, she wrote about it. And Trump knew a lot of those businessy things. And he would give us tips on this and that, call this person. And the payback was, get me in a story, talk about my Atlantic City casino, talk about me at this restaurant. So you paid him back in little things that way. And that's the way he operated. He was just a character in New York. Could always get on the phone. He always called you back. He loves the newspapers. He loves that promotion. Constant.
Gotcha. Now, this question, feel free to not answer again, but how many presidents are you Eskimo brothers with? No names. No names.
Oh, no, I'll give you names. You know me. I don't care. I'm Eskimo brothers with Clinton and Trump. I don't think that George Bush Sr. or Jr. or Jimmy Carter or Nixon rode around in circles, or I'm a little too young for those. Oh, George Bush, I could conceivably be an Eskimo brother, but I don't know anything about his sex life. But Bill had a ball and Trump had a ball, and Trump and I are more than one. We're Eskimo brothers with more than one girl. But Bill and I are one girl. She was one of the first girls I met out here. Beautiful girl, Asian and Spanish. And we were together quite a bit. She was a stripper out here in LA, and she lived in Chicago before that. But when she was in Chicago, she worked as an intern. I didn't know this. I was at her house, her apartment, and I see on the wall a thank you letter from President Clinton. I said, this is like 1996. I said, 97. I said, what's this? She goes, because I walked in the night the lights were out. The next morning, I read this thing on her wall, a thank you for Bill Clinton. Oh, I worked for the president. I said, what do you mean you worked for the president? She said, I did some interning at the Chicago Democratic blah, 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 and I happened to get elected. I said, you're an intern? Like Monica? She goes, exactly like Monica. I said, holy shit. So she ended up telling me stories about him, and nothing creepy. She slept with him. You know, it wasn't like she was creeped out by it. She didn't bust apart like Monica. She wasn't thrust into a national stage. She had a fling with him. If you saw her, you'd know why he wanted to. So I think it's only those two. But I'm also probably the only gossip columnist that slept with the president's daughter. Ronald Reagan's daughter, Patty Davis, was a girlfriend of mine for a bit back in 96. So that's kind of a flip side of things. You don't see that too often.
No, I don't think you do. That was right around the time she was in Playboy, right?
It's exactly why we met. We met because she came to New York and she was doing promotion for her spread. And part of promotion back then was to go to the Howard Stern show and to sit down with me. Playboy and I had a great relationship. The centerfolds always came to me and Howard Stern. It was that way. And before Howard Stern became really huge, they came to me. But then Howard had the show, and of course Playboy wanted that. So yeah, I was lucky enough to have direct friendship with Playboy. So Carmen Electra, Jenny McCarthy, anybody on the cover, Nancy Sinatra, Downtown Julie Brown, Patty, I was the guy that would help them. And as a result, dinners, flirting, flings, it happened.
Nancy Sinatra. Holy moly.
Well, no, I didn't have a fling with Nancy.
No, I got it.
She became a terrific friend. I love her. She's great. She posed late in life. I think she was in her mid to late 50s at the time. And I was like 38, 37. But we got along great because, you know, I'm an Italian kid. I loved her father. At the time, he was still alive. I went to go see him in person. I sat with her. And then one of my favorite stories of all time, probably my favorite story ever as a gossip columnist, I had tickets for Frank's 80th birthday party at the Shrine, which was televised. I was not allowed a ticket because I didn't like who was performing for him. And I was vocal about it in my column. And the publicist wouldn't give me a ticket to go to L.A. So I went, called Nancy, and she said, you're going to go see my Uncle Lou at Venero's Bakery. And this is a guy named Louis Domes, real name Lou Picella. Lou was Frank's childhood friend who became a big-time mafioso for the Genovese family. And I went and see Lou. I stated my case, and Lou said, I know you like Frank. I know you're going to write nice things. I'll get you to the show. He paid for me first class, got me a ticket. I sat with Nancy, and then that night when the show had wrapped and everything was done, I went back to my little apartment. I get a phone call, maybe 12:30. AJ, Daddy wants to sing. I said, what are you talking about? She says, we're at the Four Seasons Hotel. He's going to sing for a bunch of us. I got my back of my car, put my suit on again, flew to the Four Seasons, and I get there. The piano player was called back to work. He'd already gone home. And there's Frank singing for about 15, 18 people, and I'm one of them.
You got to be fucking kidding me.
No. It was and I go back with him to the point where my mother used to cut school in Brooklyn to go see him at the Paramount Theater. She was a Bobby Soxer. I went with my mother and father to see Frank at Madison Square Garden at the main event tour where Howard Cosell introduced him. We sat way up high. I took my mother to see him at Radio City where she could barely stand up. Once I was older, she was like a little girl. And then I get to be with Frank's daughter and see Frank alone and say to him, my mother used to see you and you're hanging over my sink, your picture. And I was able to tell him that. And it's a joke. He said, I remember your mom. I remember that day. She sat to the right. He said she sat to the right of the stage, 4 rows back. He likes to, he's shooting the shit. But man, it's definitely the best story ever for me because there's not many people higher than Frank on my list of who to meet. I met Muhammad Ali. He was up there on my list. I can't think of someone that I think highly of that I didn't get to meet, or not just meet, but to get to know. And I used to sit with Nancy, and when I moved out to LA, I was alone, and she used to invite me to her house on Sundays. We used to watch The Sopranos, the first season, and she'd make pasta for me. I'd have black coffee with her, just her and I alone. And I'm sitting in her house, and there's pictures all around me of Frank as a regular dad. Very surreal. Very surreal. So, yeah, I'm going to write about those stories in my next book. I'm already doing it now. There's great stuff like that. How do I get in positions like this? I got dropped into some amazing scenarios.
Yeah, you're the Forrest Gump of real life.
Yeah, I thought that was a joke when somebody said it along. Somebody described me as the Zelig-like creature from the Woody Allen movie, and I hadn't seen the movie to know what he meant. And I saw it, and Zelig is this guy that always pops up at these important events. He's at the Kennedy assassination. He's at the MLK thing. He's at the big game at Ebbets Field, where the big home run. He was always this guy who was everywhere. And to look back on my life, I was so many places, meeting so many people. Bob Evans is way up there on my list as well, who just passed. I can't explain it, but I'm certainly thrilled that that's the way it's been.
I bet. I'm a huge Frank fan. He was actually buried on my birthday.
Oh, gosh.
I have over 100 of his vinyls. That's not even a drop in the bucket to what he did. There's pictures of him all over my house.
Sure.
Oh, I love that dude. So I'm super jealous.
Right.
Last question, and then we'll get you out of here. At one point, your podcast was on Podcast One.
Right.
What happened?
Nothing salacious. Norm Patitz, who runs Podcast One, owns it, knows my producer, Mike Agavino. Mike started the company that houses my podcast. So at one point, Mike was being called by Norm as maybe you want to take over the company. And Mike was like, I may take over Podcast One. That was going to happen. It was a major thing. So Mike was having these meetings. My show was picking up steam. I'd done Corolla a few times. This was last January or December. And he said, I want to take AJ's show. I was supposed to get paid a good sized check to come to Podcast One. It was the amount of money that would have made a lot of things go away in my life. And I was so excited. I was out of my house. My wife and I had separated. I was living on my nephew's couch, and this money was going to be big. Then suddenly that money got half. I said, okay, it's still a lot of money, whatever. Then Mike no longer was being looked at as the guy who was going to take over Podcast One. But my show was still alive there. Then Norm got nervous at me because AJ likes to say what he says, and I'm going to get sued. I had to prove to Norm I would never do that. Okay, I'll take the show, but I can't give him any money. All right, okay, fine. But you'll make money with advertising. Okay, fine. Now the summer here, it's like 6 months later, it's the summertime. I'm on Podcast One. They didn't do a fucking thing to publicize the show. They couldn't get any ads for me. Meanwhile, I'm like Adam Carolla's one of his best guests, but they just couldn't do anything. And in like August, they told Mike, it's not working. We really can't get ads for AJ's show. Meanwhile, the numbers they told me my show was doing was so big that how do you not get ads? I'm not saying anything different than Corolla says. Whatever. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. So then we just said, what are we doing here? Let's leave. So they basically said, we're going to drop the show. And Mike said, no, we'll leave. Don't worry about it. And we left. So it was a weird time. It could have developed into a bigger thing. It could have meant more money for me. But once the signing bonus disappeared, there's no difference to the way I ran my show. Frankly, it's fine. I'm better off not running those ads that you hear that interrupt Adam's flow. I know they're quick and you fast forward through them, Of course, Joe Rogan has that show that's front-loaded with 15 ads that nobody listens to. I'm not even sure why companies advertise. Nobody listens to those ads. So I'm better off with just a listenership that comes in, knows there's no ads. I might have one ad once in a while on my free show, but I really give it like a minute and a half of my time. But the rest of it, I like just going uncensored, free, not worrying about advertisers, not being told they don't like that joke, that's not good for their brand. I'd much rather have it the way it is. I'm not making as much money as I would be making a podcast one, but in time, my content stays the same, I will. So it's just a slower build to where I want it to be. That's all.
Well, good for you. And that actually clears up, in my mind, why your segment has that specific intro on the Corolla Show.
It's time for Allegedly with AJ Benza. Called that so we don't get sued.
Oh, they look there. Norm was nervous about, they're not going to sue you, they're going to sue me. And I guess that's his way of indemnifying, getting out from under the possible lawsuit. Meanwhile, knock wood, it's been 30 years and no one's ever sued me. So, and the one person who did, Robert Downey Jr., it got dropped. And years later, I found out I was right. He was lying and they were lying for him. And when I met him, he admitted, yeah, that was me. You saw at the Mondrian Hotel. You weren't seeing things. That was me. I was high. I fucked up. The last year I covered the Oscars, 96. I broke some stories. I knew I was going to go back to New York and not have a job, so to speak. And I called my editor. I said, look, I've got a lot of stories to break. I'm looking at Robert Downey Jr., nail polished, eyeliner, can't stand up straight. We're at the Mondrian Hotel. He's supposed to be in, I think, South Carolina shooting a movie. And his probation was that if he left where he was working, if he came back to L.A., he was subject to go to jail. They said, are you sure that's him? I said, I'm 20 feet away. Of course it's him. So I ran with the story that he was fucked up and drunk at the hotel. Well, I come back to New York with these threatened lawsuits. He gave Pete Hamill more ammunition against me. You're going off half-cocked. You're not really... I said, it's him. But to avoid the lawsuit, because Liz Smith came down on me, I said in my next column, you know, I might have been 3 or 4 gin and tonics into the evening. Could have been someone looking just like... I had to say something that made light of it. But I knew I was right. 3-4 years later, when I moved to LA, I'm hanging out with my manager, who was a producer on that movie, it just so happens to be. And he said, oh, remember that shit you did with Robert Downey Jr. and the whole thing? Yeah. I said, I saw him. He said, you did see him. He left. He got a plane and left the movie shoot to go to LA because he wanted a party Oscar weekend. And we couldn't stop him. By the time we found out, he was gone. And we had to keep it under the wraps. And I said, I knew I was right. But meanwhile, his publicist, Marty Singer, the lawyers sent me threatening lawsuits, and I played the game. But I met Robert even 2 years after that, and he admitted, oh, yeah, I was out of my head. But, you know, we had to do what we had to do.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
AJ Benza, you are available on Instagram at Real AJ Benza. You are not on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm off Twitter. Just Real AJ Benza on Instagram is the best way to get me. Twitter, I can't go on anymore. I said too many truthful things, and they don't want me there anymore. Better, because I was going to get myself in a lot of problems if I kept talking. But yeah, Instagram is the best place to get me, or come listen to my show, or go to patreon.com/Fame is a Bitch.
Fame is a Bitch is an AJ Benza Workhouse Connect production, featuring the endless wisdom, insightful commentary, and sometimes fucked up perspective of AJ Benza.
Fame
He liked to be walked on a leash and play really dirty, kinky sex games.
is a
The guy put the cock in the Peacock Network, okay?
bitch.
Fame is a Bitch. The free one is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but I highly suggest the Patreon daily one, which was Monday through Friday. And for the price of a tall latte once a month, you get 5 days a week of wonderful, titillating, scintillating conversation. AJ Benza, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, man. Good luck to you. Talk to you down the road.
All right, take it easy, buddy. As always, thanks for listening, Streetwalkers. And don't forget, follow the show on Twitter at FascinationSTPD, on Instagram at Fascination Street Pod. Follow the podcast page on Facebook at Fascination Street Podcast. And of course, you can always email me at fascinationstreetpod@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and rate us on iTunes. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.